Back we are. Good to be here. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. It's coming up to 8:06. Good morning to you. Have your cup of coffee. Join us and enjoy the conversation as we try to save this nation from Barack Obama and maybe from John Boehner. Is it about time that Boehner, as I said before the break, stood up and said to the president, and to the American people, no more immigration reform discussion. We can't do it with this lack of trust president. He's lied so many different ways. He's tried to get administration officials to lie, including Timothy Geithner, now coming out today in his book about being told to lie about Social Security not being a cause of the deficits in our budget. What do you make of this? Shouldn't we all stand up and be counted, and shouldn't we be the ones to make the change? Paul is first. Paul, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Nice job filling in for Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
I agree with you. Boehner should stand up. He should stand up to them on a lot of issues, especially this immigration. No immigration till those borders are closed, secured, and then we know exactly who's coming in here. But, I was going to start out my conversation by saying, woe was us. We got Obama, we got Holder, we got Pelosi, we got Reid, all the jokers, those liberal loons. But you're right. Again, we need to stand up to them. We need to say, enough is enough. This is our country. We want it back. These liberals, I never really cared about Democrat, Republican, but now I see the way these liberals act and the way they conduct themselves. They're just a bunch of idiots that won't listen to any side but their own.
I agree with you. But it's also in this state. Recently, Ed Markey proposed that there be smart guns only in this country, meaning that only the person who bought the gun, whose fingerprint matches to the trigger mechanism, that have a chip there to read your fingerprint, could use the gun. So your wife couldn't use it, family members couldn't use it to defend themselves. That's what Markey wants to do: control people. I mean, this state elects these people.
That's the key word. This government, this administration, these Democrats want to control us. They want to control from the minute we wake up in the morning to the minute we go to bed. And we got to say no. I'm from Texas, so I'm visiting my mother. She's 99. She just had an operation for gallstones. God love her. She's listening to us right now. But at least Ted Cruz is speaking up. I hope he doesn't back down like these other ones that are kind of giving in. I hope someone can keep the fight going, and I think if we push back on Obama, he's going to get so mad. He just hates it when someone disagrees with him. But we got to push back on this guy. He is going to take us to the destruction. He's not going to be happy till he destroys this country.
Well, I appreciate the call, and I thank you. And the bottom line is Boehner now said to an Hispanic group in Texas yesterday that he's going to see if Obama can be trusted. He thinks there were many of his members of his Republican caucus in the House who want to do immigration reform, and some don't, and it's going to be up to Obama to show trust. I think he's beyond trust. You cannot trust Barack Obama, period. I trust a used car salesman first. You can't trust him. So Boehner, stop getting on that podium about trusting the president. Just say it for what it is. And by the way, Boehner also said he wants Jeb Bush to run for president. The very guy who wrote in a book that he was against citizen status for illegal aliens, a path to citizenship, and then said a few weeks later he favored a citizenship path for those people, and now came out and said a few weeks ago that illegals coming in are committing an act of love. And now Boehner wants him to run for president. How can you trust these guys? Nick, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Good morning.
How you doing, Jeff? I'm sorry, Mike. You're doing a great job for Jeff, by the way.
Thank you.
Jeb Bush, not why I called, but if Jeb Bush were to become nominated to run, the amount of people who didn't show up for Romney, conservatives, would probably be magnified, to the third or fourth power? That's pretty much would be the sentiment of conservatives. We've had enough of the Bushes. To get back to the immigration, if part one would be to fortify the borders or do whatever is necessary militarily, right, and politically to strengthen the borders and prevent not only the bad people coming in, how about the drugs? That's part and parcel with that border, right? We have plenty of military to devote to that, as they leave Afghanistan and have gone from Iraq, supposedly. We've got plenty of military to take care of that. What's wrong with this country? Obviously, term limits, EPA, for instance. There's two huge things right there. One is ruining our economy, the EPA, of the politics as well. But the EPA has ruined the farming industry, it's ruined our food industry. And why? All in the name of corporations that want to bring stuff in cheap from third world countries. Thomas Jefferson was right. When the government comes oppressive, it needs to be overthrown. This is why they hate the Second Amendment. They don't care about Sandy Hook. They don't care about the theater in Colorado. What they care about and fear are people being armed and eventually overwhelming them, as well as it probably should happen. I hope I live to see that day. Thank you.
Well, you know what? Hillary Clinton said last week at a conference that we should not have all people owning guns anytime, any place. She's against, basically, the protection of the Second Amendment is what she fundamentally said. And obviously we don't want felons or psychiatric dysfunctional people to have guns, but everybody else has a right to own a firearm. And you know what's ironic? You want to bet that her bodyguards have guns? Want to bet? I mean, it's insane that she wants one thing for the rest of us and something else for her. That's how they live in that elitist, smug, and arrogant world of the Hillary Clintons. By the way, let me share with you, so we have it clear on the table. This is Title 8, Section 1325 of the U.S. Code. Here's what it says. Any alien who enters or attempts to enter the United States at any time or place other than as designated by immigration officers, or eludes examination or inspection by immigration officers, or attempts to enter or obtains entry to the United States by a willfully false or misleading representation, or the willful concealment of a material fact, shall, for the first commission of any such offense, be fined under Title 18 or imprisoned not more than 6 months or both, and for a subsequent commission of any such offense, be fined under Title 18 or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. In other words, a misdemeanor the first time, a felony the second time. I just read the law. Does this administration carry it out? Really, it's true, most have not, and we get stuck because of it. It's unconscionable. Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868. It's your country. We want to hear from you. Carol, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd just like to ask your input on this. I say this frequently to congressmen, senators on the radio. Why don't we just use military reserve pilots who have to log hours? They have it already allocated in the budget for the fuel. Use it so that they can use the C5s that you screw seats in and drop them off. It costs the taxpayer nothing that in addition, in excess, other than what's already in the military budget. They decide, I know, I was a reservist, do we go fly, log our hours, lie on a beach, or do we go fly and go skiing? All they have to do is log hours. Why not make use of them and get rid of the illegals? What's your input?
The question, the point is a good suggestion, Carol. Because it would not be, I suppose, it'd be cost for the fuel. But if they're having
it's already allocated, they have to log hours.
I understand, but let me just finish. You're right. They have to fly anyway. But it's not about. Let me say it this way: do you think we have the capacity to secure our southern border?
I think we do. As military, I think that Obama just wants to destroy America, and I think the politicians see money in it for a cheap labor force.
That's absolutely true. So, in other words, yeah, you're right, they could do that, but I'll give you one better. We spend money, waste money on a ton of different things. He put out a $787 billion program, so-called stimulus package, a few years ago, and that's gone away because they were temporary jobs. Supposing he'd use some of that money to build across the southern border a strong, defensible fence. that would not let people through.
We already have Al-Qaeda that's come in here through the southern borders. They've said it themselves.
That's true. And by the way, there are some southern Texas sheriffs who've had hundreds of Middle Easterners come through the southern border and had to hold them until they were cleared as not being individuals who are terrorists. So, the sheriff said we're overburdened here by this. My point is, yeah, you could use those pilots, but you could build a fence. You could do that and stop this. They don't want to stop it. The point is not about what we can physically do. The point is about whether they want to do it. And they don't. They want to denigrate this country. I just went through the 36,007 people who have 87,000 criminal convictions between them. Heinous violent crimes. And they let them out. Why did they let them out last year?
Because they don't care. They want to destroy America, just bring us down, put them on the system, deplete the taxpayers. It's all a hidden agenda, I believe.
I appreciate the point, and I thank you for calling and raising the suggestion. It's a good one, but you have to have the will to do that. And this administration certainly, I think everyone would agree, doesn't have the will. Ann, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to, when you asked for patriots to call in, that's one of my favorite topics. But my frustrations have led me to take some action myself, because, the lack of information, and if you take your right to vote seriously, you really need to have information on which to base your decisions. And after a number of years of getting frustrated with, what story do you listen to? What information is valid? How can you draw a conclusion? So out of my frustration, I remembered something my mother told me 35 years ago. If you want to know what's going on in town or in general, join the League of Women Voters. So I did. And it was really quite enlightening, too. It's another aspect of how people can get involved. And I was surprised by the fight it is to get people to the polls, get people involved, get people to take on this mantle of, fighting back. I'm frustrated. I'm scared of what's happening in the country with what, the tone that Obama has set for everybody. I think it's leading to sort of a national depressed state, and people need to be revived. And I really appreciate what you were doing today to kind of inspire people. So I hope other people will too.
I appreciate that, and I thank you for calling, and it's good to have you with us. And look, I suppose I could say it shouldn't take an inspiration for people to want to dig in and support their country. But I'll ask you again, what is your sense about whether we can make this country be the great nation that it was in the past? To protect everybody's rights, but at the same time acknowledge that there are certain values that we have in this country, that we protect and assure that the country maintains its integrity. How do you maintain the integrity of this country if you put criminals back out on the streets who have already demonstrated their convictions for violent crimes, and now you put them on the streets? And now what happens when the first victim occurs from one of those 36,007 who commits a violent crime against a family member of, God forbid, your own or somebody else's family? What do we say to them? Well, your family member's a victim because Barack Obama couldn't care less about you. It's really the same thing about the four that died in Benghazi. He didn't care about them. And now he puts these criminals back on the streets. He doesn't care about you. There's got to be a change. And there's got to be a change from this namby-pamby waffling from guys like John Boehner. Somebody's got to stand up and be strong and say, enough is enough. Are you willing to do that in your community and say this publicly? Our number is 617-266-6868. Let's get the lines jammed one more time with people who care about this country. If you consider yourself patriotic. By the way, that's not a dirty word. It is the word, if the word patriot were in your application to the IRS to get a tax-exempt status for your nonprofit organization, you wouldn't get that nonprofit status. that tax-exempt status because of the word patriot or the word big government being opposed or the word Tea Party. At what point do we say, you can't do this to us? Points of view politically are protected. Obama, you can't go in and tell us with net neutrality that you're going to decide whether or not a conservative website can be given out by an internet service provider, because that's what they want to do. Now, they're still trying to do it, even though 2 appeals courts in the federal appeals circuit system have said you can't do it, Mr. Obama, unanimously. They're doing it anyway. We've got to change this, folks. 617-266-6868, 821, Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO after this. Yep. And back we are, folks. Good to have you with us as we move right along. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. We've got to save this nation. Got to stand up and really, Democrats are a lost cause. We know that. Forget about Ed Markey. You got to just unelect them. Forget about Elizabeth Warren. You got to unelect her. And Deval Patrick. Luckily, he's leaving. But we've got to change Republicans to stand up for what they believe in or should be believing in. And if they don't like what the traditional Republican values are, then they ought to leave the party. Go to your calls for those of you who care about this nation and leaving a nation to your kids and grandkids that you can be proud of. Sharon, first of all, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning to you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on.
Sure.
I've had some thoughts during the last couple of months because I do have friends who have now Republicans, and I think one of the problems is, maybe you'll agree, I'd like a little guideline myself because we could be active in this community. We need a strategy. I think that there's a large base of youth out there now that are really wondering about these Democrats and what's going to happen to their health care, to their pensions, et cetera, and job availability. I think a great place to start, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, would be large college campuses. I do teach at a college now, and I do find, just as a side note to tell you, that they do have a beautiful lounge for the kids, and they have these huge elevated aerial televisions. It's fixed all day long on CNN 44. So besides that, and spreading into states where we need some exposure, give us some guidelines. I hope you agree with me. Thanks, guys.
I thank you very much. And certainly, young people need to be activated. And look, the fact is that record numbers of young people in their 20s are moving back home with their parents because they can't afford to live on their own. That's what's happening. Because there aren't the jobs out there. Do you know that 75% of the jobs created last year in this by this administration, under this administration, are part-time jobs? They're not meaningful family wage jobs. There was a whole series of stories about how people were going, young people, graduated from college, going to China because that's where the jobs were. And that's part of what this administration strategy is, to move the wealth elsewhere. That's the bottom line. And by the way, by the end of this year, China will be the #1 economy in the world. They thought it would be about the year 2020. It's already happening this year. We're going to be #2 for the first time in memory. Gordon, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Until we root out the cancer itself, nothing's going to change, and the cancer is in the White House. Until these guys get enough balls to take this guy on, the cancer is just going to continue to spread and continue to eat away at society. And I don't think they'll do it, and because I think that nobody wants to take on a black president.
Well, I don't think that's it. I think there's been a lot of criticism of this administration. On occasion, even the New York Times has been critical, only on occasion. But I don't think, I'm convinced race is not an issue, even though some people would raise that. The fact is that if you look at let me ask you this question, Gordon. You look at the policies as they are in this administration. Are you going to tell me there's something there that makes sense that the American people should support? Is there anything that should be supported that this administration does?
No, not at all. But what I'm saying is nobody will take him on because these guys are so afraid to be labeled racist.
Well, you know what? Then they're cowards. Then they're cowards.
They are.
If the definition of electing a black president is that hands off on every issue, then they can stick it where the sun don't shine, as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to hear that.
But you got to think about it. I mean, look at what this guy has gotten away with. What else is it? I mean, this guy he does whatever he wants.
Yeah, look, if he were white and doing this, the same mainstream media would protect him anyway. Look at Joe Biden, a complete idiot. He's an idiot. And Jeff Kuhner actually wrote a great piece once. I told Jeff about this, and I used it on my own show, about how Joe Biden needed psychiatric help. And Jeff laid it out. You ought to ask him about it on the air sometime. The fact is that Joe Biden gets protected. But when the other vice president, Dan Quayle, talked about family values, they made fun of him. Because he was a conservative Republican. Remember Dan Quayle?
Yeah.
The vice president? They made fun, under George Herbert Walker Bush. They made fun. Thank you for calling, sir. They made fun of him. Because he talked about family values, which all of a sudden has become a big deal now. And yet Biden, with his lunatic comments, gets protected. Because these mainstream media protect the left-wing wackos. It's not about race. It's about left-wing radicals who are protected by the mainstream media. 617-266-6868. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO at 8:30. More of your calls right after this. Back we are, folks. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel here for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning to you. By the way, get right back to your calls. Talked earlier about the one fellow called and said, well, under the Bush administration, there weren't chemical weapons in Iraq. Well, as I said, the Israeli Mossad found that the Syrians actually received those chemical weapons from Saddam. When there was going to be an inspection, trucks were shipped from Iraq over the mountains into Syria full of these chemical weapons. What do we know now? And remember Barack Obama talked about the red line? Syria, don't use these kinds of chemical weapons or you're in big trouble. And then he backed away, as he typically does. Now, a story just broke about a half hour ago. An international human rights group said Tuesday it has strong evidence that the Syrian army used chlorine gas on 3 rebel-held towns last month. The statement by the New York-based Human Rights Watch adds to concerns that chemical weapons are still being used in Syria months after a chemical attack killed hundreds of civilians last August. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which monitors implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention, said in April it would investigate the chlorine claims, hasn't commented further. The report was released by Human Rights Watch yesterday. So now what we have is this, actually today it was released, Tuesday. What we now have is this a continuation of that use of those chemical weapons, and Obama's threat about the red line is over. And again, more balderdash that means nothing to the international community, proving again, by the way, that Syria did have those chemical weapons, some of which came from Iraq. Okay, let's go to your calls. More bumbling by Obama on that one. Joe is first. Joe, you're on with Mike Siegel at Boston's talk station WRKO for Jeff Kuhner. Hello.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Good.
Listen, Mike, I can't agree with your last caller anymore. I mean, he is right on the mark. The only reason why they're not, this guy would have been impeached a long time ago had he not been black. So your last caller was 100% right. Give him credit. He was 100% right, because this guy has done more against this country than any 5 presidents put together.
I agree. Look, I agree with you.
Talk about anybody else.
Wait, slow down a minute. I agree with you. But one of the reasons that he won't be impeached, you may be right. I happen to think that it wouldn't matter if he did the same policies as a Caucasian president. To me, it would make no difference, because you have a Senate led by Harry Reid, which wouldn't consider convicting a Democratic president. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't even bring it up. It wouldn't happen. So impeachment by the House would be, look what happened with Clinton. The Republican Senate was too cowardly to convict Clinton, wasn't it?
Right. Mike, all these senators and these congressmen, don't they have families that they're worried about and their families that they're worried about? That's what's happening to this country?
No, because they live in their aristocratic world of smugness and arrogance, too. They like having all of the pension benefits, the Rolls-Royce health care plan, all of what they get being in Congress as elitists, whether they're Democrat or Republican, and they live above the fray, so to speak. So no, they're not going to give that up. And by the way, their biggest concern is getting reelected. That's what they care about.
We could never last another 3 years with this guy, Mike. Never.
Well,
never last another 3 years with this guy.
I understood the American people voting him in the first time. It sounded good.
I voted for him, Mike. I want to change. I voted for him. I'm one of them.
So the second time, it's on the American people. It's on the American people. I thank you, Joe, very much. They should never have been reelected, although Romney didn't exactly run the greatest campaign. Republicans don't have the ability to run good campaigns. McCain, Bob Dole, Mitt Romney. I don't know what it is. Mike, you're on with Mike Siegel at Boston's talk station WRKO for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. I've been the caller. You've been doing a great job this morning. I think one of the things that I'm a longtime independent who's voted Republican in Massachusetts basically because I'm hoping someday to live in a two-party state. One of the things that I think that we need to point out is how many Republicans, how many conservatives sat out the last two election cycles. Are you going to get a perfect Republican candidate? Are you going to get a 100% out of a 100 Republican conservative candidate for what you want? No. But if you get a 10% Republican, if you get a 40% Republican, if you get a 60% Republican, it's better than getting a 0% Republican. If you get a person that you call and you say, I voted for you and I donated to you, that person's going to listen to you. If you call a Democrat that you didn't vote for and you didn't donate to, they are never, ever, ever going to listen to you.
I'll give you a good example.
Get out and all vote together.
You know, Republicans have the ability to self-destruct because you get the religious conservatives and the political conservatives with different agendas, and they go at each other. You've got either the Tea Party sitting out if a moderate Republican wins, and you've got the moderate Republican sitting out if a Tea Party conservative wins in a primary. In other words, they don't work together. I'll give you the best example of all. Mike, let's talk about Colin Powell. When Bill Clinton was running for re-election, second term in, I believe, 96, Colin Powell was talking about running for president. Now, look, and socially he's a liberal, okay? But the fact was he was a Republican. And he could have beaten Bill Clinton in a re-election effort by Clinton. Could have beaten him. He'd been the one guy that might have. All right.
Yeah, definitely.
So what happened? Grover Norquist, Paul Weyrich, and the right-wing Republicans held a press conference condemning Colin Powell, not Bill Clinton, but Colin Powell, as being too liberal. Well, guess what? Colin Powell said, the heck with this. If my own party's going to undermine me, I'm not going to run. And he didn't run. Had he run and won, the one thing would be sure. Since there was a Republican House and Senate at the time, he would have signed Republican legislation. He was a Republican. But they didn't want, the Republicans couldn't come together behind a candidate who they might have had to hold their nose a little bit about, but at least he would have been a Republican. That's the problem in the Republican Party.
Right, and we need to start thinking that an abstain is a vote for the other team.
No question about it. I appreciate the call and I thank you, and that's absolutely true. We've had that happen in several elections. Romney had 3 million people sit out on the conservative side, or he would have won. Bruce, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Hey, Mike, how are you today?
Good.
Hey, did you get over your little Billy bull crap over there yesterday? He was off his meds a little bit, but you did a good job with him. But that's what we have in our government. People just like him. That's the same people that vote for them are just like him. I just want to get back to where we were talking about the chemical weapons. We would have had them where they were had we made a move, but the Democrats dragged their feet. They let them take them over the border just like they planned. It was all set in stone, and that's what we got today. Smoke and mirrors. People don't want to, deer in the headlights. Let's get the wool out of our eyes and see what's really going on and take care of business.
Well, you got to stand up for. Look, if Obama's going to say that chemical weapons are unacceptable and they're off the table, and if you use those, we're coming after you, then you better follow through with the words by your actions, right?
Exactly. I mean, come on. He can't, like he did with Russia and with Putin. I mean, Putin's a tough guy. You don't make threats that you can't keep. And if you're going to make threats, stick by them. Uncle Sam needs to be credible again. We need to bring back Uncle Sam.
Does anybody respect, listen, even in Europe, does anybody respect Barack Obama as a military commander-in-chief?
Hey, wait till some of these people go on vacation. I went to Europe in '89. I remember seeing a bunch of World War II veterans, and we're in a brewery, like a brew house, like a big Hofbrau house, and everybody was cheering about France. Everybody was cheering about all these countries. So we're all sitting at the table, and me and a bunch of guys go, USA, USA. And my father looked over me. He's a veteran pilot, Navy, World War II. Dove remains when they bombed us in Hawaii, and it just was so upsetting that he was afraid for us expressing how proud of that we were being Americans in that foreign country in Germany, that we might get rat-packed by these people because
they despise us. And I appreciate the call. Our military saved Europe. I mean, Tom Brokaw himself wrote the book about that courageous generation, that remarkable generation that did that for the world. We got rid of Hitler, got rid of Mussolini and Japan and their aggression. And what do we get for it? The jealousy and envy and being despised. That's what we get for it. Lucy, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I think I'm hooked on this program. You said something that caught my attention. We know now definitively that the chemical weapons from Iraq, some of them went to Syria, and those are the weapons being used. If that's really true, then Obama really can't go in, because then that would put the lie to all the talk about the Iraqi war being illegal, in my opinion.
Well, the thing about that is that the one thing I criticized George W. Bush for is that he didn't communicate the justification for his positions very well. I remember vividly when Ariel Sharon at the time, the Prime Minister of Israel, said, we know through our intelligence, and Israel has great intelligence, that in the middle of the night one night, a bunch of trucks went from Iraq over the mountains into Syria, bringing the chemical weapons. Now, I can't tell you with certainty that the ones being used now were those. I can tell you that the Israeli intelligence is pretty powerful. And when they said that, Bush should have picked up on it and made the point that there were chemical weapons in Iraq. It's just that he sent them over to Syria. And now, with all these chemical weapons being used by Syria, you begin to see the connection.
Yes, there's got to be a connection. And the other thing is, I think Obama's hands are tied, because it would then be found out that some of those weapons came from Iraq, and then Democrats would be caught in another lie. But this is the other thing, too. When the Democrats want to put down the Tea Party, and the Republicans want to put down the Tea Party, or anybody that's speaking out, you guys need to start playing the clip from when Hillary Clinton screamed out, and it was a cackle type of a scream. She kicked out, "More power to the people." And she did that during Bush's term. And that was a rallying cry for the Democrats. So you guys start to need using that against her. So that's my opinion.
Thank you very much for calling, Lucy. I appreciate it. Now let's get your calls. If we say more power to the people, the power is right here. Your voice can be heard here. Your voice can express your indignation at the way this country is being treated. I mean, if you can't see it right in front of you, then I think you're being nearsighted, folks, to be honest with you, because we see the country's economy going down. We see our military strength going down. We see the respect around the world going down. That's part of the intentional agenda of this administration. It's not about protecting the great United States. It's about protecting the agenda, the ideology of Barack Obama and his thugs. And I'd appreciate everybody getting online who hasn't done so and telling us why you believe we need to make change and what message you want to send to the Republicans to have them stand up and be counted. What do you want the Republicans to do? What is the biggest issue in your mind that Republicans need to stand tall on in this country for the next election? The only people I hear really out there for Republicans saying it straight are people like Ted Cruz, Sarah Palin, Scott Walker, and a few others. How many really are doing that in the Republican Party? 617-266-6868. That's the number to Boston. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner, who's off today. Good to have you with us at WRKO. Okay, folks, back we are, 8:56. Good morning. Jeff Kuhner Show, Mike Siegel in. WRKO is where you are. Patriots, let's hear from you as we go to Joe. First of all, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Joe, good morning to you.
Yeah, hi. I got a bone to pick with you guys. I supported and I voted for McCain. I voted for Bob Dole. I voted for Mitt Romney. I have nothing to go out and vote for in this election. When I see Boehner and I see the Commerce, the head of the chairman of the Commerce. Chamber of Commerce, he's telling the Republicans how to vote when it comes to immigration. They don't do anything about affirmative action. I don't agree with free trade, what they call free trade. I have no issues that the Republicans are supporting me on.
I understand.
I really don't. There's nothing for me. You know what it is? It's basically they're going to do the same thing as the Democrats, but they're going to use a better, pardon the expression, better grade of lubricant.
Well, yeah, you're right. Most of them, you're right. That's why I said there's only a few. Ted Cruz, Sarah Palin. I think Scott Walker's a terrific governor. Those are the people, and thank you for calling. It's true. A lot of them are just sanitized version of Democrats, light-wing Democrats, if you will. Democrat light, call it. Rod, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner, WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good.
Hey, just a question. Maybe it's a dumb question. Way back before we went in Iraq, Saddam Hussein killed about 100,000 Kurds with chemical weapons. And then, everything ensued later on with us going into Iraq. Nobody mentions those weapons of mass destruction. And I also remember the circle jerk they were putting the inspectors through at the time, just staying a step or two ahead of the UN inspectors. So, why does nobody talk about the fact that he did have chemical weapons and he used them before we ever went there, but everybody says he didn't have them? I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I think the fall down of the Bush administration, George W. Bush, was ineffective communication. I don't want to go into it in detail, but on Katrina, the hurricane, George W. Bush had a strong case to be made. He didn't make it. On the chemical weapons in Iraq, he had a strong case to be made, but didn't make it. And other matters as well. Obviously, Saddam had the chemical weapons. He just simply shipped them over to Syria. But nobody wanted to talk about that. Why? I don't know. That was the weakness of the Bush administration, was communicating powerfully strong positions. I appreciate the call. By the way, let's make it very clear. That war was absolutely legal compared to what this president does. The Senate gave George W. Bush a resolution giving him the authority to do, quote, whatever is necessary, unquote, with regard to Iraq. The Senate gave it to him. So going in there and doing what he did was approved by the United States Senate, including Democrats. So let's not say that was anything like what's happening in this administration. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Your calls will be next. Okay, folks, it's 9:05. My final hour for these 2 days, and it's great to be with all of you when I get the opportunity. Boston's always been my favorite market. Great audience, great people, and I love it. It's good to have you with us, too. As we get back to your calls, dealing with trying to overcome what seems to be a collapsing of the Republican Party folding into the Democrats. Now, the one thing is that apparently immigration reform will not happen in the way Obama wants it, and so we'll have to look at that. Not clear, though, as to whether he might try to move the Republican House toward getting immigration reform done. He keeps talking about it. We're not sure where Boehner stands on it. And with so many other issues, it's the same old in most of the Republican Party. How do we change this? What do we do? Are you excited about voting in November? 50% of Republican-leaning voters say no. 42% say yes. Most Republican voters are not real excited about voting, according to the latest Gallup poll. Jay, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. The first thing was basically piggyback on what you said about Congress approving the resolution. It was actually, for the liberals out there that care, the UN actually approved it with Resolution 1441, so they got even that backing. Not that I care, but they may care.
By the way, that resolution said that there would be serious consequences, and the argument was that George W. Bush moved too soon in Iraq regarding that. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't think he moved too soon at all. But, 1441 did do that. The UN said there would be serious consequences. And by the way, as George W. Bush did say, there were 17 prior resolutions that Iraq violated under Saddam Hussein.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing was regarding your question about what the Republican Party has to do. My opinion is, it seems to always be the same people holding their noses. It would be nice to have it mix up once in a while, or maybe it seems to be, like with the state, like it was the whole mix up with Mark Fisher, and, is he going to run? Is he not going to run? Is he going to be in the primary? Is he not going to be in the primary? It seems to be picked before you even get a chance. And I know there was the issue of, his numbers were close, so that's kind of, debatable, but it just seems like it's always that's the case. So that's really all I have to add.
I appreciate it, and I thank you, Jay, for calling, too. Let's go to Hank next at 617-266-6868. The number to Boston if you're a patriot. Hank, go right ahead on WRKO.
I'm definitely a patriot. But anyhow, it's not going to be easy to beat them because the Republicans aren't Republicans. The indoctrination centers that they have taken over, which is the schools and the colleges, they're putting out liberals and progressives. And they're infiltrating the Republican Party, which is a tactic of Saul Alinsky. Get control of one or both parties. And that's what they're doing. McCain's a progressive. He's not on our side. Lindsey Graham. None of them are on our side. It's going to be very hard because they control the indoctrination centers.
That's a good point, but the question then is, how do you reach young people to get them activated to realize that there are values they can adhere to? That's...
Like I said, it's hard because they control the schools. And now that they got this Common Core coming in, it's not going to be easy. I mean, it's very hard there's hardly any progressive teachers in the schools. They're all progressives because of what they were taught in the colleges.
There's no question about that. And if you talk to kids who are in the Young Americans for Freedom, they get that on campuses. I've interviewed these kids, conservative kids who the professors chastise them. Well, you know what? Then you have to have these foundations come in, legal foundations, to start suing the universities and colleges for imposing a point of view instead of trying to imbue in these kids the ability to think for themselves. You can't put it's a propaganda point of view, and that should not be tolerated, sir.
I know, but that's how we're losing.
Well, then you got to stand up and fight it. The problem is these guys, look, John Boehner's too concerned. He just won a primary in Ohio. He's too concerned about winning re-election. These guys are concerned about that. We ought to get people in there who say, look, I don't care if I get re-elected, but this is what I'm going to do to change this country. And you know what? They get tons of support from people.
I know. He don't care either. He's on their side. He's a sleeper self-progressive, too. It's all about the power and the money. He cares more about him and his speakership than he does about the country and the kids in this country.
Well, you know what the truth is? The truth is that he and Nancy Pelosi both, she was speaker, of course. The reason they got the speaker jobs is because both of them raised money for their parties at very high levels. In other words, they're fundraisers, not necessarily the brightest kid on the block. And so what you wind up getting is mediocrity in the speakership.
Yep.
I appreciate it, sir, and I think because the money talks and nobody walks. It's about the money.
They're all little robots. That's all they are.
Thank you, sir. Good to hear from you. Steve is next. Steve, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Good morning to you.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Great job this morning. So the thing that I wanted to just mention is that my wife and I are both very conservative, and we've been so disgusted with the Republican Party and as well as the Democratic Party that we've become independents the last 10 or 15 years. And our view is very simple. Regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats, all they really care about is making sure that they don't lose their financial position at the trough. And the few Tea Partiers that are coming on board, who are the bright lights and are speaking out, if they get the positions of power, it's only going to be a matter of time before they go to the dark side and they get in control and they get involved with the money people, and they're the ones that are calling the shots. The only way we see the country being able to come back to the people. There's got to be a constitutional convention, and we've got to get these people out of there. We've got to change some of the rules. They aren't going to change the rules because we have the fox loose in the chicken house.
Well, I'll tell you
without a constitutional convention to make sure we get this thing cleaned up, get them out of there, get the lobbyists out of there, give them term limits, it's never going to change, Mike.
I was just going to mention to you, Steve, that the answer to your question would be term limits. But you're right. They're not going to terminate their own jobs by term limits. I remember when Newt Gingrich had his contract with America, one of the 10 items was term limits. He got a lot of those through, but he couldn't get that one through because they don't want to lose their jobs. I mean, that's so self-serving, it's beyond belief. Look, when Jefferson...
Everyone wants to know how Obama got elected for the second term. Very simply, no one wanted to give up their free stuff.
That's part of the problem in this system. And, look, the bottom line is that we have to have term limits. They won't do it because they don't want to lose their jobs. They want to keep feeding at the trough, and they want to decide when they retire. These guys, when Jefferson talked about this government, talked about going to the House at that time, because the House would, in those days, would appoint the senators, the House members from your state. Jefferson's point was, look, you go there for a term, spend 2 years in D.C., you go back to your farm, you go back to your merchant business, you go back to your whatever it is you were doing before, and it becomes basically a way of serving the country as a servant of the country. You know, in European countries, they consider it a privilege to serve. And France is a good example. And you go back to the private sector. In this country, the politics becomes a career, and it never ends. It's like this run-on sentence that never ends. And you're stuck with Ed Markey, and you're stuck with Elizabeth Warren. It's over.
Yeah, you know, Mike, my wife and I live in New Hampshire, and one of the things that's unique about New Hampshire, although it's starting to go to the dark side as well, is that there are very few career politicians in New Hampshire, because they're only paid a stipend. People are expected to come in for the 2 or 3 sessions to do their legislation, and then they go back to their jobs, which was what the original intention was. But even that now is starting to become corrupt, because people that get into those positions now get into a position where they can control the money. And we're not there yet, but we're starting to turn into what Massachusetts, we're turning into a very liberal state up here again.
Well, but you see, one of the other things that most people won't realize outside of New Hampshire is that there are 400 members of the House.
Okay.
So you got, in the House in New Hampshire, you've got, it's so diluted, you've got farmers and you've got small business people from all over the state. It's very different. It really is representative of the people. But you're right. You know why New Hampshire's having a problem today? It's because Massachusetts people are moving up there.
Yes, they have. And, we've got Democrats everywhere. And, I mean, the House and the legislature is controlled now by Democrats. I think this fall we're going to see some major changes. But, it's, again, it gets back to the same thing. People are going to patronize the cronyism and the crony capitalism, and it's all about money. And it always has been and always will be.
Let me tell you something. I'll give you a little point. When I was on the dark side, I was living in Londonderry, and at one point I was president of the Londonderry Democratic Town Committee. And the Republicans asked me to run for the state house, and I just couldn't in those days see myself changing. But you know what? I learned over the years, as Ronald Reagan did, that the party left me, I didn't leave the party, and I was delighted to move over to the Republican side. But because of what's happened, when you look at John McCain and Bob Dole, who I have great respect for, and McCain too, as their military heroes, and Mitt Romney, these are not great candidates for president. Romney could have been, but he wasn't. They weren't great alternatives as candidates. You needed stronger candidates on the Republican side, and you didn't get them. Thank you for calling. It's good to talk to you, sir. Yeah, those were the dark days for me. Let's go to Catherine next. And Catherine, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Good morning.
Hi, Mike. Good morning. I'm a first-time caller, and
thank you.
Until recently, I've been very apathetic, and now I've just made a lot of changes. I'm a new Tea Party member and getting out there trying to make a difference. And I just think it's slightly concerning what your last caller said about calling a convention, because it could go awful. It could go in the opposite direction that we would want it to, considering who's got all the control right now.
Once you call a constitutional convention, you're very sharp, Catherine. All bets are off. Anything could happen, because you could call it for one particular aspect of the Constitution, but when you call a constitutional convention, the entire Constitution is up for grabs. And I'm going to tell you, I've talked with people on the left. I remember being at a social event, talking with people on the left, and we were talking about the Tea Parties, the very group you're involved in, and I said, let me ask you something, to this woman on the left. I said, what's wrong with free markets? What's wrong with limited federal government only doing what the Constitution says it ought to do? What's wrong with balanced budgets and limiting the national debt ceiling and not keep increasing it? And by the way, what's wrong with constitutional compliance? And she's looked at me and said, oh, I can't accept that constitutional compliance. We need to get past that. So you're right. It could be very scary.
Yeah, absolutely, especially, well, on so many of the amendments. But then also I wanted to mention you're talking about immigration reform. And I think that we're just going at it completely wrong, especially here in Massachusetts. What they're voting on this week, our legislature, is Bill H3285, or the Safe Driving Act.
Yep.
And that's just completely backwards. We need to do it on a federal level and get these people citizenship within a reasonable time, within a reasonable monetary stance, and we just have it so backwards.
Well, I don't know about, but look, I read earlier Title 8, Section 1325 of the U.S. Code, which makes it illegal, a crime, to enter this country without authorization from the government. So, I mean, we got to hold people accountable for breaking the law. That's my view of it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Catherine, for calling, and God bless you for getting involved, too. Good to talk to you. Let's take Marianne quickly. Marianne, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. I wanted to send out to your listeners that are frustrated right now, calling all citizens. Instead of just listening, let's stand up and act. I don't know if you're familiar with William Baer, B-A-E-R, in Guilford, New Hampshire. He's a dad who spoke up at a school board meeting regarding page 313, and that's all I can say about the book. It's so torrid that he challenged the book being given to his 14-year-old daughter, and the meeting chairperson pointed a finger at him and told the police officer, flicked him, remove him. And they actually picked the guy, he's an attorney, and they arrested him on the spot. So what I wanted to say to all the Tea Party folks and anybody wanting to get involved, this is calling all citizens. We're not just, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, even some liberals don't like the way that where our country's going. So May 16th in Washington, it's called Operation American Spring. I'd like to see some people go down there and just stand up. We're all going to go in large numbers. Lots of Tea Party organizations are connected. 912 Project, Oath Keepers, a lot of the groups in New Hampshire. We went and mobilized to Connecticut to help with the gun confiscation they had a couple months ago. There are also people there from the Bundy Ranch that went down and supported that family that's being devastated by the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, bunch of crooks. They have no authority, and the state of Nevada did not help and step in. They should be helping their own citizens. We went from New Hampshire, several other states, Oregon, Kansas. They all went to support the Bundys. Also, here in New Hampshire, we mobilized to other states, including Massachusetts, with this ridiculous nonsense they're trying to pass the gas tax, hiking it along with inflation. We need to stand up. When I say calling all citizens, I'm not just saying Republicans. You guys hit the nail on the head this morning by saying these Republicans are milquetoast. They run as Republicans, they vote as Democrats. We call them in New Hampshire rhinos. We have 2 state representatives here from New Hampshire that are exactly rhinos. They're not helping us. We need a wash of all offices of incumbents this coming 2014 elections to get prepared for 2016 elections, so Hillary doesn't get elected. Liar being the operative word in her name.
I thank you very much, and I appreciate your call, and good to talk to you. I want to just, before we break, and we'll get back to your calls quickly, let me just mention this. You started this show at 6 o'clock this morning with the story about Michael Sam kissing his male lover when he got drafted by the St. Louis Rams on national television, and why should we be exposed to that? He can have his own private life, but why put that on television? That's a minority view that's being imposed on others. Well, now, believe it or not, there is a group called the Military Association of Atheists and Free Thinkers. They're making a request today to have a chaplain for atheists in the military. They're going to meet with the Navy today. Representative John Fleming from Louisiana threatened to use legislation to block this if necessary. He said the law is clear that any chaplain needs to have an endorsing agency, and he questioned whether the applicant would have that here. Democrats, obviously, have tried to pass legislation creating this job. Can you believe this? Democrats want a chaplain for atheists. Republicans offered a measure to prohibit the Pentagon from naming a chaplain. The House approved that measure in July, so the Republicans stood up on the right side. The Defense Department, though, could make this decision without any congressional action, and that's pretty scary. Apparently, the group says that more people identify themselves as atheists and humanists than any other non-Christian denomination. Republican lawmakers describe this push as nonsensical. The motto of the Army Chaplain Corps is, "For God and Country." So how can you have an atheist in that corps? They say it's self-contradictory. We're going to replace true chaplains with non-chaplain chaplains. Well, this group, Military Association of Atheists and Free Thinkers, says military chaplains are not providing enough outreach for those who do not believe in God. Now, if you're a military veteran, do you want to see a chaplain for atheists? 3.6%, by the way, in the military identify themselves as humanist. We going to change everything to have that chaplain for atheists? I thought chaplains were to represent a belief in God. Now, you talk about this country convoluting itself. That's a good way in which we are doing that, isn't it? Our number is 617-266-6868. Let's get your calls. Patriots call. Military veterans, military active duty personnel, give us a call. You like having chaplains for atheists in the military? That could happen. At Boston's talk station, WRKO, Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. It's 9:24. Stay with us. Okay, folks, let's get to your calls. 9:27 it is. At Boston's talk station, WRKO, Mike Siegel in, and good to have you with us as we get right to Patrick, first of all. Patrick, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
How's it going, Mike?
Good.
I'm a Marine veteran, enlisted right out of high school and college in 2005, went in as a private first class, came out as a lieutenant, and now I'm a captain in the reserves. In Iraq, we did find chemical weapons. It wasn't to the point that the Bush administration wanted. It was briefly mentioned, but you know how it is with the media. Service members dying in Iraq was more important than we found the weapons and we found critical insurgents. That's how it's always been in the wars. That's number one. So we did find weapons of, quote, mass destruction. It just wasn't nuclear weapons or huge stockpiles that were going on scuds in the warheads. The second part is that the Republican Party has become blinded to everything that will get them reelected. They are completely incapable of thinking for themselves, much like the Democrat Party. Both parties are completely incapable of thinking for themselves. They will look to the leadership and do what the leadership tells them. This is an issue. This has always been a political issue going far, far back. It's an up-person mentality.
They're afraid. They're cowards. They want to get reelected, and they're not sure how to do that, so they vacillate back and forth. Look, most Americans want the immigration laws enforced. If you stand by that and stand up and be counted, you're going to be okay. But they don't seem to believe that. They seem to go with the wind, and they get intimidated by Obama's lackeys out there, his sycophants going out there and screaming and ranting and raving like Jay Carney, who lies through his teeth at every press conference, pretending to have a point of view that the people do not support. They've got to believe that the people will support them if they stand up for conservative points of view.
I agree. And look, I am the first one to say that our immigration laws do need reform. We do need to look into that. But that doesn't mean that you take the law and only enforce it when it affects you. My family came over during the Irish Need Not Apply era. The laws were still enforced back then.
What do you make of what's your view about the atheists wanting chaplains in the military, since you're a military guy?
Look, atheists already have a chaplain. It's called a psychologist. They already have that in the military. A psychologist and psychiatrist for an atheist is the same as a chaplain. A chaplain is supposed to deal with religious and spiritual issues. If you're an atheists, and I'm not saying that if you're an atheist you don't have spiritual issues, but you need to understand that the purpose of a chaplain is to be there to help you when you go through an emotional crisis or a crisis of faith. It's very much like how the the Muslims and the Sikhs want us to redo our entire uniform code. They want to be able to wear their turbans despite, they don't want to have to shave. Despite the fact that shaving is important because, God forbid, you're actually in a war zone and there's a chemical attack. You need to put a gas mask on. That is going to break the seal of the gas mask. It is an issue of they want to be included, but they only want to be included the way that they want. They do not want to conform to the actual military doctrine.
I appreciate the point, and I thank you very much for calling. Good to talk to you. Thank you for your service to our country, too. 931 at Boston's Talk Station, WRKO, 617-266-6868. Your calls are next. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Stay with us. Let's get back to it, folks. Good to have you with us. My last half hour. Great to be here with all of you at Boston's Talk Station, WRKO. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. As we move to your calls at 617-266-6868, starting with Carol, who is on Boston's Talk Station, WRKO. Good morning, Carol.
Hi, Mike, again. I'm a vet, so I'm just saying from my viewpoint.
Well, now, Carol, wait a minute. Now, did you call previously today?
Yes.
Well, let's stick to the one call a day. I appreciate it, and I thank you for your service to the country, by the way, but let's stick to one call a day per caller. That gives us more diversity of calls and opinions. Let's go to Don next. Don, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah. One thing you don't know, you probably don't know. Humanism is a religion declared by Congress in 1984. And I have here an article I cut out of the paper a number of years ago. What the humanist educators are saying about your children. Every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with certain allegiances toward our founding fathers, toward our elected officials, toward his parents, toward a belief in the supernatural being, toward the sovereignty of this nation as a separate entity. It's up to you teachers to make all of these sick children well by creating the international children of the future. This is taken from an address given at a childhood education seminar in 1973 by a professor of educational psychiatry at Harvard University. This was reaffirmed in a phone conversation March 8, 1983. Here's what the humanist educators are planning to do to your children. The battle for humankind's future must be waged on in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their roles as proselytizers of a new faith.
It's not, but look, we can debate whether it is. I don't think it's a faith at all. You can read that, and that's what they believe. It doesn't mean that it's a faith in the sense that there is some higher level being that you acknowledge as being your spiritual influence. And because secular humanists believe that the human being is the be-all, end-all. That's not a religion. That's just self-aggrandizing of the human beings. So, no, I mean, I'm glad you read that. It's good to hear that point of view. And yeah, they do want to do that with kids, to strip away religion as we know it. But it goes back to the point, why would somebody in the military want to have a chaplain for atheists? Because they don't believe in anything higher. So what's the point? It's only the belief in yourself as, in effect, the Godhead. Somehow, you are the ultimate, and there's nothing above you. Well, that doesn't need a chaplain. That needs a psychiatrist, as the caller said earlier. Linz is next. Linz, you're on with Mike Siegel at Boston's Talk Station, WRKO for Jeff Kuhner. Hello. Linz, good morning. I guess he's gone. All right, let's try Kevin. Kevin, you're on WRKO with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Hello there.
Thank you, Mike. Michael, I just want to say it seems to be that the ones that want to stand up for conservative issues are just against the tides in every which way. We need to throw out the Karl Roves, the Jeb Bushes, even days ago, we have Mitt Romney chiming in on the minimum wage. Here it is.
It's mind-boggling. So what, and every time when we do want to stand up, it seems to be that we're being knocked down. We're being told that this administration is the most with deportations. Well, what they're doing is just checking off everyone that would have in past years showed up at the border or turned away, being knocked down as someone being deported. Why do we need any more laws? If we all have to sign up for health care, the unaffordable mandate, as I say, why don't we ask every person that's here, undocumented, illegal, go sign up. You have 18 months, 24 months, go sign up. Other than then, you are subject to deportation. It's not rocket science, but we need more people just to stand up with a backbone.
I agree with you, and I thank you for calling, and that's the point here. People are not standing. Listen, let me ask the question of this audience. Why doesn't John Boehner file a lawsuit on behalf of the Republican House, which would have standing, saying that the President of the United States is changing law, meaning Obamacare? Obama's changed about 22 elements of that law over a period of time to make it more palatable so that it would stay in place but be delayed so that in November the harshness of Obamacare won't be hit completely on the American people. It'll come after this November's election. So now the Republicans can say, look, we passed this law. The president wanted the law. It was the Democrat House and Senate majorities that passed it. They wanted it. Now he's changing it without the approval of Congress. You can't do that. Why doesn't Boehner bring a lawsuit and let the courts decide, or let the courts be forced to say that they don't want to get involved, or they do want to get involved, or whatever? There's no proactive aggressiveness by this Republican Party, is my point. Mark, you're on with Mike Siegel at Boston's talk station WRKO, in for Jeff Kuhner. Hello.
Hi, good morning. I had never heard the term, I've heard the term humanist, but I never knew exactly what it meant, and I'm kind of learning that today. I'm a Christian myself, and I have a problem with atheist kind of beliefs, just kind of overtaking basically the entire political correctness agenda that we see on TV and everything. And I don't know. It just kind of upsets me. And I saw yesterday that they were talking about holding some satanic ritual at Harvard. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, the Black Mass, but now they canceled it because of all the outrage that came back from the religious community. The Catholic Church in Boston got upset. I mean, a whole bunch of people got upset, so Harvard canceled it. But the fact that they were going to do it tells you where they're coming from. The fact that they even considered doing it.
And they call it religious freedom. It's like anti-religion.
And that's what humanists are. I mean, look, I used to teach, and there was secular humanism that was a dominant force. It meant that basically the human being was the ultimate, that we were the Godhead, and that we should treat ourselves as being the ultimate being, and there was nothing beyond us. Now, most people don't believe that. And yet somehow, as the guy read from the agenda going back for a decade, goes back, I remember in the 70s and 80s when all that was going on, values clarification and all of these movements about getting the human being to be distinguished as the ultimate and moving away from religion, that somehow we wouldn't be subservient to any God figure. That's what this belief is. Most Americans don't want that, but most Americans like you don't know that it's even going on.
Yeah. And why do we have God on our money then?
Well, and listen, I could go through chapter and verse about that whole thing, but I thank you for calling. It's good to talk to you. I'll tell you a quick story about a case that I covered on the air about 3 years ago. An 8th grade boy in a small town in the Midwest was given an assignment with the rest of the kids. The assignment was write about the ultimate person that you admire for their values and beliefs, and would be the person that you would want to emulate more than any other person. in the world. Who would that be? And they could be dead or alive. This kid comes back, raised in a Christian home, and he writes Jesus. And he writes one page, which is what they're supposed to write about, why Jesus was the role model for him. Everybody wrote about different people. And the only paper that was turned back to the student was the one from this kid who wrote about Jesus. The teacher said, you can't write about this. That's unacceptable. Well, the parents went ballistic, because how can you say, I mean, no matter what religion you are, what message was ever more powerful than the message of Jesus about peace and love and all of those things that were nonviolent? No matter what you thought about whether he's divine, his message was impeccable. Why wouldn't you want to follow that message? And this teacher said, no, you can't do that. So the parents got all upset. It wound up that the kid, that she was forced to accept that paper. But that's the undercurrent of this insidiousness trying to keep us away from the value system that made this nation great. That there is a belief in a higher being, in a universal being. And that we should stand for that and not hide from it and not denigrate it or degrade it or reject it the way that woman rejected the kid's paper. And the point was that the First Amendment protects freedom of religion. And the Establishment Clause says that government can't create or establish a religion. Well, this woman got it all wrong, because she wasn't creating a religion. She wasn't telling the kid to write about Jesus. He did that of his own decision. And so the school wasn't creating a religion. This kid was just saying who he believed in as the highest valued person. And she rejected it anyway, not even understanding what the First Amendment freedom of religion meant or the Establishment Clause meant. She couldn't go out and promulgate one religious icon, but this kid could certainly do that from his own thought process, and she rejected it. And that's where this country is in many ways. Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868, 617-266-6868. By the way, if you want to comment about Hillary, I mentioned earlier, and her basically saying this. She said, the gun culture has gotten, as she said, way out of balance, and that we need to rein in the notion that anybody can have a gun anywhere, anytime. What's your sense of that comment from Hillary Clinton? Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at 9:49 at WRKO. Stay with us. Okay, folks, let's get to it. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. This country going through perhaps its most dangerous time since the Civil War in terms of the direction we're going to take. We need to survive the next 2 years and make the decision to move in a different direction as we move this country out of this muck and mire. I was just thinking about the way Barack Obama and his sensitivity to Islam. He has about 6 Muslim Brotherhood advisors. They're going to have advisors on the Muslim religion being part of the influence on this administration. And you go to the bank on the fact the long-term plan of this administration is to try to move Sharia law into acceptability in this country, and that is scary. Linda, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning. Keep up the fight. I'm calling. I spoke yesterday about Trey Gowdy's comment, and I checked it out. His comment about notifying our allies in the Benghazi area was on Sunday morning, Chris Wallace.
The whole issue of Benghazi is going to be opened up, as you mentioned, with Trey Gowdy, and I thank you for calling about that. And it's just one more element of the way this administration has convoluted this country. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I'm going to tell you, no matter what anybody wants to say, look, you can go back to the beginning of Barack Obama's roots in public life. We learned about Jeremy Wright, anti-Semitic and anti-American. Jeremy Wright, the pastor, who was the biggest so-called religious influence on Barack Obama, next to his going to school in Indonesia at a Muslim school. And Jeremy Wright has nothing but hatred for this country and imbued that to his congregation. As a matter of fact, it was Oprah Winfrey, who was an attendee at his church in Chicago and then left that church because Jeremy Wright was too far off the deep end. And then there was Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, the guy who was with the SDS, Students for Democratic Society, blowing up buildings in the 60s, a guy who had nothing but disrespect for this country's institutions, became an ally for Barack Obama. In fact, held the first fundraiser at his home for Barack Obama when he ran for the Illinois State Senate. And then there was Tony Rezko, organized crime connected in Chicago, a mentor of Barack Obama. What we're talking about here is the indications early on that this guy was not what he appeared to be, that he had a very dark cloud over his head, very ominous tidings coming with Barack Obama. And then, of course, it's all about this unwillingness to define Islamic fundamentalism or jihadism as the problem for this country, that the administration spokespeople constantly say that these are just terrorists and they're not from any point of view. That's baloney. They are from a point of view. Their point of view is that Allah and the Koran give them justification to commit the violent acts they commit and the murders they commit. And that's what they believe in. Now, whether that's what the Koran says, whether that's what Allah wants them to do in their belief, it doesn't matter. They're using Islam for murderous, barbaric, terrorist purposes. And to me, it's about time that we looked at that honestly and candidly, because if you don't define the problem, you can't solve it. And then, of course, this whole thing about education and about the left wing trying to diffuse any belief in a higher being, and now the atheist organization wanting its own chaplain in the military. There's an insidious encroachment on what this country's values and belief system are. And it is time for the American people, the silent majority, if you will, to say no more of this. This cannot stand. And I hope every one of you is going to stay involved and participate and be the strength that this country can be, because the masses of people who believe, as we've discussed this morning, have the power to do it. My name is Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Be good to yourself and the world, and the world will be good to you. Have a great day.
News at the top and bottom. Talk in between.
Yes, it is. Thank me very much. Go right ahead, my friend.
This is AM 680 WRKO, Boston.